We experience the world as Cartesian space. That is, we feel the world is a three-dimensional space, and that both we and everything around us exist in this space. Now, Cartesian space works in a very specific way. It has very specific rules, and here's what I want you to think about. Once you think you are located in Cartesian space, you end up following the rules of Cartesian space, the same rules that apply to tables and chairs. You start defining your own being by the rules of Cartesian space. Here's what these rules look like. In Cartesian space, objects have clearly defined edges, exist at specific locations x, y, and z, occupy definite volumes v, and are separated by empty space. What an object is defined by its externally measurable properties that the object itself possesses, such as color, weight, size, and so on. So, in Cartesian space, a hammer is a hammer, a mailbox is a mailbox, and these two objects are clearly separated by empty space from each other, and from you, the observer. The hammer and the mailbox each occupy definite volumes and are located at specific points in space. Objects have distinct visible edges. It's very clear where an object stops and the empty space begins. Objects have properties, like weight, color, and shape, and these properties reside in the object. These externally measurable properties define what the object is. A hammer is red and weighs 2 kilos. A mailbox is rusty and bent up. A table is brown, 2 meters long, and weighs 12 kilos. So in Cartesian space, we know objects only from the outside, from all of their externally measurable properties, like color and weight and shape. Cartesian space is essentially a neurological modeling of our environment. Our brain assembles thousands of cues of light, depth, and distance, and presents us with a coherent operating space, with our own point of view in the operational center. This allows us to do all manner of things. But what happens is this: we end up placing ourselves inside this neurological model, and believing that's where we exist. And then we have that problem we mentioned a few moments ago. Once we place our being inside of Cartesian space, this means we start defining our own being according to the rules of Cartesian space. Cartesian space is a place of isolated objects occupying specific volumes, located at specific points, separated by empty space. So this is how we start thinking of ourselves. We start thinking our being is a thing, something that is located in Cartesian space, within the edges of our two-legged volume. We start identifying this being in terms of its external properties and its coordinate locations in space. So, I am John Burrow. I live in Knoxville, Tennessee. I am 45 years old, 6'1", and I work in insurance. We define ourselves by our outward properties and our location. We define our being using Cartesian rules. This becomes both how we think of ourselves and how we show ourselves to others. The problem with defining our being using Cartesian rules is that it leaves out almost everything that being is. This can be seen by looking at Martin Heidegger's hammer. A hammer can be identified as being red, 2 pounds, having a steel shaft, 16 inches long, and laying on the table. I can then go on to describe the external properties of the table, the room, the building, the afternoon outside, and so on, and it will eventually all add up to this moment of world. Except it doesn't. When we say a hammer is red and 2 pounds, we leave out everything of that hammer's existence in the world, its actual being, the rough hand of a grandfather, nails, a roof being built to shelter children, and so on. We can dismiss all this and insist that Cartesian edges and properties define what the hammer is. The hammer is red, weighs 2 pounds, and is located on the table. But then we strip away everything the hammer actually is. And this is why Cartesian descriptions of hammers, tables, rooms, buildings, and afternoons will never add up to a moment of world. When we think of our being as something that is located in Cartesian space, inside a two-legged volume, we shrink the definition of our own being so that it occupies the same dimensions as all other objects in Cartesian space. Suddenly, our being has dimensions and volume, like a toaster or a lawnmower. We define our own being in the same way we define a toaster. It is a physical thing located in a certain volume at a definite point of space within clearly defined edges. We take Cartesian space to be reality itself. We end up living inside this neurological model and taking on the definitions of the objects in that space. We end up believing that our being is located inside a volume V at point XYZ in that space. Now I'm going to tell you straight out, moving deeper in Zen involves leaving this definition of your being behind. You will still operate in Cartesian space. You will still meet your friends for lunch at that Mexican place on 41st Street. You will still jump out of your seat to try to grab that foul ball at the baseball park. Cartesian space will return to its rightful role as a neurological model for operating in the world. But you will have to break out of this whole idea, this unexamined belief that is running your whole life, that your being is a thing located in a specific volume in Cartesian space.